Good evening, and welcome to a webinar hosted by Swagbucks and Tops 100 for UK bloggers on the convoluted issue of tax. My name is Nick Green and I'm UK MD of Swagbucks. It's a site that rewards consumers for spending time online. And we've got 6 million customers worldwide, many of them mums and many of them based in the USA. And we have a big international blog network or influencer program where bloggers promote us and get paid handsomely for doing so. Anyway, what we've learned from those bloggers is that even though the industry in America is far less nascent than it is over here, they're still extremely concerned about the thorny issue of tax and how their blog earnings are actually taxed. So what we wanted to do today was put on an event to help UK bloggers kind of circumnavigate this tricky area. So whether you're an established blogger or just starting off on the road, you need to know how to do things right. So hopefully this hour will help. I'm going to pass over to Sally from Tops 100, who will be your host for the evening. Thank you.
Of Tops 100, which is a network of around about 10,000 UK bloggers covering everything from home to parenting to food, entertainment and much more. But one of the things that all of the bloggers we talk to have in common is that they're looking for ways to monetize their blogs, to be rewarded for their blogging, but also to do so in a way that feels legally appropriate and that isn't going to cause problems. And bloggers often have very different sorts of tax circumstances. You may have a job, you may be freelancing, you might be on maternity leave, you may work part-time and pay tax already on PAYE. And so there are lots of very complicated issues that blogging can throw up. And sometimes some of the advice online can seem very scary. So I think what we and Swagbucks wanted to do tonight was just provide more of a user-friendly way for you to find out about tax, earnings and blogging. And this is going to be part of a series of webinars that we'll be doing. So tonight we're joined by two tax expert accountants who are going to be answering some of the questions and just providing some guidance and advice. First of all, we have Izabela. Izabela is a tax consultant at Nyman Libsen Paul and advises all kinds of organisations from Hollywood actresses to businesses. And also we have Karen, who's been working in tax accounting for more than 20 years now. And so both of these ladies are going to provide some advice and some information. What we do have within the webinar is if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a Q&A button. You can type questions into the Q&A and I will see those questions. And we're going to get through as many of the questions as we can over the next hour or so. So what I'm going to do is I will just kick over to Izabela and Karen to let them just introduce themselves and give us some general advice on tax and blogging. So good evening, Karen and Izabela.
Hello. Hello there, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Sally. Obviously, blogging has become a popular tool among individuals to earn extra money, particularly among busy mums, maybe who need flexibility for working from home and that can fit in with their daily routines, dealing with children and things like that. But obviously, there's one question, whether the extra earnings actually have an impact on your tax position. So we've been asked to say a few things about it and hopefully give you a little bit more information about your obligations with HMRC. So the first question really is, will I have to pay tax on any earnings that I bring in? Over to you, Izabela, for that one.
Well, of course, if you are running a blog, generating income from that, you will have to pay tax on it. Good starting point is you have to consider the way you're running your blog. Is that a blog being run by a proper business or is it just a hobby? You need to bear in mind that what you consider as a hobby might not necessarily be considered as a hobby by revenue. Revenue there are various categories which you can call budgets of trade. Those are some criteria that you will need to go through and whether you meet those in order to establish whether you're running a proper trade. You should be familiar with these, and these are all nicely listed on revenue website. The main ones are profit-seeking mode, the number of transactions, type of services being provided. I suppose Karen will now mention and talk a bit more about the main two that are applicable to bloggers.
Yep, certainly. Well, the main one really is the profit-seeking motive and commerciality. Obviously, if you've got an intention to make a profit, then that will determine, crucially, whether you're operating as a business or as a hobby. Many new businesses make a loss. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're not running as a business. In the early years, that's quite common. One good example of profit motive is charging for advertising space and therefore generating income through that link. The second one would be obviously the number of transactions taking place. If you're receiving casual earnings here and there, it could be viewed that that's just a general hobby that you're running. Whereas if you've got regular transactions such as blogging regularly and obviously generating regular income, that would be deemed as running a business. Obviously, having one of those may clearly demonstrate whether you're trading or not, but sometimes it's a combination of two or three of them. Obviously, if there is no motive for profit, then HMRC won't really be that interested in you if you're not making a profit, because there's no tax at the end of the day. So Izabela is now going to explain basically, if you consider that none of the badges of trade apply to your blog, and you think that you're just running it as a hobby, what your obligations to HMRC still are.
Well, you must establish that your blog it's basically run as a hobby, it's not a trade. You therefore you still have to pay tax on any profit that you generate, but we should be aware that obviously each individual has a personal allowance, which in current tax year it's 9,440. Good news, it's going up to 10,000 from April. Any income over that amount becomes taxable. The main point whether you're running your business as a hobby or trade is that when you're running it, when it's established that it's a hobby, you do not need to register with revenue as self-employed. You do not need to pay Class 2 or Class 4 national insurance. However, you still need to pay tax on any profit that you make. If that's less than 2,500, then you can simply, and you are as well an employee, you can ask revenue to adjust your tax code, and therefore additional tax due on that income will be collected through your employment. If it's more, or you basically do not want more tax to be deducted from your employment, you can simply complete tax return and pay that tax through self-assessment. One important point to note is that any loss you make when blogging as a hobby can be set off against your other income carried forward.
So it's generally just loss.
It's a loss. Now Karen will talk a bit more about what's required when you're running your blog as a trade.
Okay, well basically if you're running your business as a trade, you will be liable to tax and national insurance contributions on any profits that you make subject to certain thresholds. Even if the thresholds aren't actually met and you have no tax to pay, you will still have to register with HMRC, usually within 3 months of commencing your trade. Otherwise, you could get fined £100 for failure to notify. Registration is pretty simple. You have to fill out a form, WF1, and you can complete this either online or through the post. Once registered for self-assessment, you will then be required to complete a tax return annually. If you do need to complete one, this will have to be done online by the 31st of January following the end of the tax year to which it relates. If, on the other hand, you need to file a paper tax return, this must be done by the 31st of October following the end of the tax year. So registering as self-employed brings us neatly back to national insurance contributions. And as we've probably said, self-employed people generally are required to pay both Class 2 and Class 4 national insurance contributions. Class 2 is a flat rate per week, which is currently £2.70 a week. However, there is a small earnings exception, and if you're earning below 5,725, you can apply for what's called you can apply for the small earnings exception to apply, and elect not to pay those contributions by completing Form CF10. Obviously, all these forms are freely available on HMRC website. Moving on to Class 4 national insurance contributions. Now, these wholly depend on the level of your profit and are payable at a rate of 9% of your profits over and above 7,755 for this current tax year that we're in. All the detailed rates of NI contributions are set out on the HMRC website. Obviously, Sally's already spoken that if you're earning via PAYE, so you already have another job, then consideration has to be given into that you're already paying Class 1 as a deduction through your PAYE income. So there's other certain deferrals because obviously limitations as to the total amount of NIC that anyone pays.
So you don't need to over.
No. Okay. Isabella's now going to talk about types of income and specific expenses that can be claimed against that income.
I'm sure you are all well aware the type of income that you are generating through your blogging, which is, I suppose, mainly from advertising, sponsored posts, well, from commission that you receive the percentage of sales made through links on your blog. So those will be the taxable type of income. There are also some, not all income is taxable, and the non-taxable income would mainly be the typical goodie bags that you might receive when you go to various PR events, as well entertainment when you are entertained by some companies about which you are blogging. As well, I'm sure plenty of you are receiving items to review. Now, this is a little bit of a gray area. Generally, that shouldn't be taxable as long as you are receiving the item for review. You will post your personal opinion about it on your blog, and you use it personally. However, if you are acquiring, getting the product, and the aim is to sell it on, then obviously you will be taxable on the receipt. Moving on to expenses, the main one will be, for example, your broadband costs, software, web hosting fees, domain registration, advertising, as well business cards, yes, travel, motor expenses. Assuming you are running your business from home, then obviously your home is your base. Any travel costs that you incur from traveling from home to your clients, that's all tax allowable. Quite a big probably expense would be use of home, and you can use, as hopefully you are aware, a part of proportion of the various utility bills that you pay, mortgage, interest, rent if you're renting your property, insurance. Those are all tax allowable, and obviously those have to be prorated according to how many rooms you have in your home and obviously how many hours you work from home. Yes. Very important is not to work exclusively from one room in your home, because that might affect the capital gains tax on the eventual sale of your property. It's always important to keep, say, Kelly in that room, and so you can always kind of use it as a kind of, say, using it also as an entertainment for your family, and it's not exclusively used for business. I suppose the other important bit is that you need to keep the records of your expenses that you're incurring. With use of home, if you're not necessarily very good at keeping records, Revenue introduced simplified method of deducting the use of home expense, which ranges from £10 to £26 a month, and you don't need to have any receipts in support of that. Obviously, that depends on how many hours you work from home. Finally, I would mention entertainment, whereas you are inviting someone for a dinner. That is not allowable for tax, and you won't receive any deduction. So it's important not to claim it against your income, as Revenue are quite strict on that. I mean, as opposed to that, say if you are just grabbing a sandwich when you're running from one meeting to another, you're on the go, then that's absolutely fine because that's subsistence. So that shouldn't be confused. I will hand it over now to Karen to talk about some capital assets.
Okay, fine. Thank you. When you buy an asset for your business, which would include laptops, computers, printers, office furniture, hardware, cameras, anything basically that you use within your business, these are not treated as an expense, but you may claim capital allowances on those capital assets that you've bought. The maximum you can claim basically for a deduction has now increased to £250,000.
So that's quite a lot.
But obviously, this is called the annual investment allowance, and prior to that, it was a maximum of £25,000. Although I'm sure that the change is not really likely to affect too many small businesses, because obviously you're not going to buy assets on that scale. But it's worth bearing in mind that there is that deduction, you know, against capital assets that you do buy. Once again, we've already spoken about personal use of things. If you buy a laptop and it's going to be used for private use as well, say for example you use it 75% for business use and 25% for personal use, again you would only be allowed 75% of that initial cost of that asset as a deduction. That's probably about it. Moving on now to record keeping, which Izabela touched on. We've established now that you need to determine how to determine your income and your expenditure. You should also be aware of your record keeping obligation, i.e. keeping accurate records of all of your business income as well as your expenditure. HMRC does have the power to visit premises and inspect records, and if they're not kept in order, they can actually fine you. So it's quite important that you keep a good record. In addition, you should keep all of your records for a minimum of 6 years, in case HMRC choose to inquire into
hopefully not
your tax return. Hopefully not, but they do have the power to go back 6 years. So it's obviously recommended that you keep all your records safely for a minimum of 6 years.
Yeah, as sole trader.
We would probably recommend just a simple Excel or similar spreadsheet, jotting down expenditure, keeping hold of receipts which are relevant to your business, which we've actually spoken about, postage, stationery, advertising, broadband, telephone, home costs, software costs, etc. With income, invoices, if they're raised, should be numbered, and any income of any type, including any cash receipts that you may receive, should be recorded. If you're just using one account for business and personal use, then obviously this should be monitored accordingly so as not to confuse the two items. And Izabela's now going to briefly mention the final couple of issues to bear in mind.
Yeah, I suppose one of the issues is VAT. Obviously that should be considered once your business grows, because you need to register for VAT. It becomes compulsory once your turnover exceeds 79,000, which might not be likely at the moment, but who knows what the future holds. As a result of registering for VAT, your services will be more expensive to your customers. However, bear in mind that most of them will be registered for VAT themselves and therefore will be able to claim back any VAT that you are charging them. Therefore, at the end, it will be actually tax neutral. You might consider registering voluntarily for VAT, and then you will be able to claim back the VAT that you are paying on your various expenses. That brings extra admin burden, but it might be worthwhile. It all depends on your circumstances. There are also various VAT schemes that you might consider to be attractive for your business, like flat rate scheme, annual accounting scheme, and cash accounting. But that's all I would suggest, because they are quite in depth. It would be, I would suggest you seek professional advice when you would like to consider those further. I will hand over to Karen now, I suppose, just to talk about tax credits, which I suppose are quite important as well, and child benefit.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, just moving on quickly to child tax credits. Obviously, these are affected by the extra earnings that you may be making, and this will also affect working tax credits too. Any additional income will have to be included on your tax credit renewal form. At present, only income above £300 needs to be included, but anything in excess of that will obviously affect your claim to those credits. I would also point out that £300 does not include any investment income, such as bank interest and rental income, dividend income. So you need to take that into account, that you might already be receiving some sort of bank interest or other investment income. With that in mind, there is a really useful tool on the HMRC website that allows you to calculate your entitlement to the child tax credit and the working tax credit, which you obviously tailor to your own circumstances.
And it's very easy to navigate. And
just finally, I just would mention the new rules which came into effect 7th of January this year regarding child benefit. Currently, they've clawed back the child benefit for anyone that's earning over £50,000. You start to lose your child benefit. It's 1% of the benefit per £100 of income that you go over £50,000. And by the time your income reaches £60,000, it's withdrawn completely. If you don't, or you haven't opted out of the child benefit scheme, then you will have to actually repay that back. So obviously, any earnings that push you over that limit, you're going to have to consider as well. Back to Izabela now, I think, just to wrap things up.
Final bit, Well, I would just mention, obviously, that once your business is generating significant profits, you might consider running it through incorporating it and running it through a limited company or a limited liability partnership. There might be tax-effective way, obviously, of running it this way, as there are substantial tax and national insurance savings to be achieved. You need to bear in mind that there will be definitely more administrative burden.
Yes.
And duties, obviously due to the duties involving with filing requirements and the associated costs that go along with that. Suppose
I think
that's it. Yeah, we hope that you found our quick chat useful, and we are happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yep, thank you. Over to you, Sally.
Over to you, Sally.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen and Izabela. We've got quite a lot of questions. So I'll try and go through them as quickly as I can. Often it's about specific examples, because I think sometimes it's very hard you think about capital allowances and things like that, and you think, well, how does that work in my scenario? So one of the first questions we had was from Vaughan, and I hope I pronounced that right, Vaughan, who was asking, as a food blogger and somebody who blogs about food, could they claim a percentage of things like new cookers or fridges as being an expense or a capital allowance?
Yes, definitely, absolutely. Obviously, you will have to adjust, because there will be some personal use, I suppose, if they're using it as well for the products that they store for their own personal use. But again, depends how much they are blogging, how often, how many recipes they are putting on the blog. That has to be taken into account. But definitely,
you can claim it.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of our bloggers review holidays and work as ambassadors for holiday brands. If you were selected as an ambassador for a brand that involved then taking a holiday, do you need to declare the value of that holiday as part of your income? And the question also, sorry, this comes from Claire, do you then need to register as self-employed and pay tax on the value of that holiday?
I suppose
it's quite interesting question.
Yes. Yeah.
It depends on the nature of the role and if there's anything expected really in return for that holiday.
Yes.
So I would guess in a typical scenario, for example, we run a blog ambassador program for Centre Parks. So we might have 12 bloggers who go with their families to a Centre Parks resort and then blog about their experiences when they come back. So they're not paid in cash, but they will receive a holiday as part of that role.
Well, I suppose as long it's you see, this is the grey area, I suppose. Yeah. Further considerations might be given, but obviously, if they are going there, it's definitely some private element, I suppose, involved, because obviously the children and say the blogger might be the wife, but then obviously the husband and the children are getting the advantage of having fun and great holiday as well. So I would say that should be prorated, to be on the safe side. If you were
to value that holiday, would you value it at the retail price, or do you value it at the cost to the supplier?
What? Yeah.
It's probably the lower of the two.
I suppose you can start off with the cost to the supplier. I suppose, obviously, if that's queried by revenue, then I suppose if you have then you will need to get a tax advisor, professional to argue it for you with revenue. And
to look into case law and things like that surround it all, because it is, as we said, a very grey area at the moment.
Okay. My next question comes from Emily, who said she blogs and earns regularly, so she understands that that's a trade, but she's already working part-time 16 hours a week. Does she need to register as self-employed to separately declare the earnings from her blog?
Yes, she should register as a self-employed, because she's running the blog as a trade, and yes, she should therefore register as a self-employed. Obviously, depending on her earnings from that blog, there might be not necessarily any class 2 and class 4 payable, as Karen mentioned about the exception that's available if your earnings are below a certain level. So, but yes, definitely she should register as a self-employed.
Okay, thank you. And also, just a follow-up question from Emily, which was, if she does then register and does self-assessment, is she right to think that she doesn't need to register until October next year and paying tax the January following? How does the timing work?
No. She should register within 3 months of starting to trade. That what she's thinking, she's right, but that only applies if you have, say, rental income or some other untaxed investment income. Then you have the 6 months time limit following the end of the tax year. However, if you are a sole trader, you have 3 months from the beginning, from the date of commencement, yes. So it's 3 months for sole trader.
Okay. And Ruth from Geek Mummy asks, if you're only making intermittent income from your blog and you know that the expenses exceed the income, do you still need to fill in a tax return?
Well, I suppose...
Is it classed as a hobby, then
no.
If you're not making any money, at the end of the day, if you're not actually making a profit...
Yeah. The profit motive is quite important. So if you know that you're going to be making losses and you will never, go
make
over
a profit, and you don't want to realise those losses in the future, so you're not going to preserve those losses, they're basically lost each year, then there would be no...
There is no need for you to
no point.
No need to.
Okay, thank you. The next question comes from Emily Higgins, who said, is the current tax-free allowance $7,475, and does that include her part-time wage?
No, it's £9,440 for this current tax, 1314, and it goes up to £10,000 with effect from next April.
Yeah. What she was talking is the NI threshold.
Yeah, that's the national insurance threshold.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have that allowance, does that include your part-time wage? So should you add what you're earning in your part-time wage to what you're earning from your blog?
You add it.
Will be your total
income.
And that includes obviously other investment income, savings income, rental income. It's not just earned income.
All your taxable income.
Everything.
Yeah. Okay.
And a follow-up question from Emily as well, who said, with her part-time job, she's paying tax via PAYE. Would tax payable via her blog earnings be deducted through PAYE, or does she need to separately register for self-assessment?
It depends. If she's running the blog as a hobby, then she can pay the tax over via PAYE, assuming the profit she's making, it's no more than 2,500 per year. If that's more, or if she's running the blog as a trade, then she needs to register with revenue as a sole trader.
Okay, thank you. One of the big questions that we have a lot of questions about are review items. So many of our bloggers have sent products to test and to write about on their blog, and it's commonly held that we should declare the value of these as income. Is that correct? And if so, how do we value products and what kind of records do we need to be keeping?
We did cover that briefly, didn't
we? It's quite a grey area, as we mentioned earlier. But our opinion is that as long as you receive the item for review, you write a review, your personal opinion about this item on your blog, you are not obliged to write about it. But
there's no conditions attached to you receiving the item, basically.
Yes.
No expectation, isn't it?
No expectation about you writing about it, but you do write about it. You keep the item for your personal use, then that shouldn't be taxable.
Yeah. If on the other hand, you maybe get sent items that you then decide, I'm going to sell them on eBay. Then we would say it would probably...
The amount that you receive for that item, that therefore would be your receipt.
You could value it at the lower of what you would normally charge for them to advertise. That's one way.
Yeah, well, there are various ways, but in general, then that would be taxable. That's the answer, I suppose. Bottom line.
That's great. Our next question is from Layla at Motherhood Diaries, who said, is it better as a blogger to register as a sole trader or a limited company? And how do you know which is the right way to go?
Well, I suppose...
Depends on your income.
Depends on your income, but I suppose start off as a sole trader, definitely, because obviously there are savings to be made when you're running your business through a limited company, but obviously at the beginning, at the starting, when you start your business, surely the profit won't be huge. And if I'm not sure whether obviously it's whether she's employed as well. If she's not employed, obviously she can use up her personal allowance, which is the tax-free amount that you can earn before you pay any tax. So it's always, I suppose, easier to start off with running your business as a sole trader.
And then when you're making quite, substantial
profit,
about £50,000 profit is probably 15.
Okay, so our next question is from Catherine at Pinkwellies, who said that she's done a tax return and she wasn't sure if she did it right because it asked for a business name, so she just put her blog name. Was that the right thing to do?
The right thing to do, yeah. You can call your sole trade,
whatever
the way
you like.
wish, yeah.
Okay. And our next question is from Molly at Mother's Always Right, who wants to know, in terms of expenses and legitimate expenses, is she able to claim for travel to blogging events or petrol if she drives, for example?
Yep. Assuming she's running her business from home, traveling to blogging events, it's definitely tax deductible.
And how do you know how much you can claim?
Well, you can claim
Fixed
either
mileage.
fixed mileage, which it's again on revenue website. That's 45p, if I remember right,
for the 10,000
miles,
and then 25p thereafter.
So I think the easiest way is to keep the records of your mileage.
Yeah, but you would have to keep a probably quite accurate log of what was business mileage and what was private mileage, though, just in case the revenue did ask to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, and Molly had a follow-up question, which was about computer costs, which obviously for bloggers is a huge thing, that they've got laptops, they've got printers, internet connections, domains, and that kind of thing. Are there rules around how much of that they can claim as expenses?
Again, it depends, I suppose, how many hours you spend blogging and how much you use it. It's your own personal judgment, how much you use that computer for private use and how much you use it for blogging, which is obviously your business. And you have to say, it's 50-50. Then obviously you will disallow half of the cost of that computer, printer, and other equipment. Obviously, if it's more, then you allow more and subtract more from it. So I think it
depends. I mean, obviously, if you're in full-time employment and you're just doing blogging in the evening, the percentage is going to be a hell of a lot lower than if you're doing it all day long and you don't have any other job. Really, isn't it? You have to look at the amount of hours I think that you spend, and also who has use of the computer and
whether your family is using it as well. And
so it's a great reason to not let anyone else use your new iPad.
Well,
it's a tax advantage. Vaughan asked for clarification on some of the advice that you've given, where you said you don't need to register if you're not making a profit. But they also said that you should include products on a tax return. So what about if you have a scenario where a blogger isn't making any cash income, but is receiving products, either lots of products or products with quite high value? What would be your advice in that situation?
Again, depends what they do with those products. Obviously, if they are receiving them often, they might be tempted to sell them on because obviously they will have excess and they don't really need them, and therefore they would be taxable on that.
Yeah, that comes in with the badges of trade again that we looked at earlier, the frequency of transactions and profit motive and things like that, which are things that HMRC will consider. That
would be crucial, basically, to check whether that's a hobby or a trade, and from then we start.
Yeah. Okay, I had a question from Katie at Mummy Daddy Me, who said she's only just started blogging as a business, and what kind of timescale is she going to need to work to? When will she next have to pay tax? And when will she have to pay the mid-year payment as well in July if she just started blogging in the last month or two?
Well, if she started blogging in the last month or so, the first tax payment she will make will be next January.
January 15.
By the end of, January 15. Yes, we are still in 2013. Yes, January 15. That's when she will make the first payment.
Yeah, the first tax return that she'll have to. She should be, if she's doing it with a view to running it as a business. She should be thinking about completing the form now because she needs to notify revenue within 3 months, and be thinking about national insurance contributions and things like that. The first tax return that she'll have to complete will be for the year to the 5th of April 2014. Which will be due to be filed 31st January 2015 if you're filing online, and then you will pay your tax
by
January 15, and maybe payments on account as well.
But that depends on her income.
That depends on how much you're earning.
If her tax liability will be less than £1,000, then she won't be required to make any payments on account for the following tax year. However, if she's making really good business out of it, then she might pay 1.5 of the tax liability,
and then a further payment in July 15.
July 15. So 2015 is the year.
Okay, thank you. And a question from Rachel, who said, can you only pay your tax and national insurance contributions annually, or is it possible to pay them quarterly?
Well, your national insurance contributions, you pay your class 2, which is taken quite often by direct debit, and that's
They've changed it now to every 6 months.
I think it's every 6 months now. Obviously, you can, I suppose, when you can elect to maybe pay it more often.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure.
And your self-assessment tax you can pay whenever.
Self-assessment tax.
They don't mind if you pay it early.
They don't mind if you pay it early. Yes, but the due date it's usually would have been January, and if she's making payments on account, then obviously January, July.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. Molly has asked, when she is attending blogging events, I think Molly goes to lots of blogging events, is she able to claim for things like meals and accommodation, and what are the rules around that if it's business-related travel?
If it's strictly business-related travel, then both hotel and obviously accommodation during her business trip are all tax allowable.
If, on the other hand, she's taking all the family with her, then
obviously
we've got that element of
personal
element,
private element.
Yeah. Okay. Question from Victoria, who asks, what's the advantage of working with an accountant, and would you advise that bloggers who are perhaps only earning a few £1,000s a year do their own tax returns, or is there a benefit to working with an accountant?
Well, I suppose at the early stages, when you are quite
if it's just a couple of £1,000 that you're earning, I would
and
try and do it yourself.
Deal it with yourself. Yeah. It might be more efficient, more cheaper, obviously.
It's quite easy to do it online at HMRC on their website, as long as you obviously
you register with them.
You register with them, and you don't have complex affairs really, and the income levels are low. It's probably not worth your while paying an accountant to actually provide that
obviously,
service
once
for
your
you.
business grows and becomes more complex, there are you want to structure it in a more tax efficient way, then we would recommend contacting a good accountant, and it's worth for paying for the fees and the experience and
and to in effect save you tax. But obviously, if your income's only a couple of £1,000, the tax on that is not going to be probably as much to even be.
Yeah.
I think we may have touched on this before, but Mary has asked, does she need to declare prizes that she wins, or things like gift cards and vouchers that she is given by brands?
Prizes, no.
Prizes, definitely no. Prizes are tax-free.
What, the gift cards and vouchers, they're in exchange for cash, aren't they, really?
I would say yes.
I'd say yes.
Those would be taxable, yes.
But prizes, definitely not.
Prizes, no.
And a slightly related question again from Vaughan, which is, I'm just trying to understand the question, sorry. Would it be okay if you're given a product to give that product away as a competition prize on your blog? Is there a tax implication there?
That's an interesting question. Yes. Exactly. Yeah. I suppose
you would treat it as income, and then the cost would come out as an expense to you, so it would level off, and there wouldn't be
tax neutral in a way.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. The next question, and apologies if you're waiting for us to get to your question. We've got absolutely loads, so we're working through as many as we can. Crystal is registered with HMRC as a childminder and wants to know, should she register separately as a blogger, or can you do both jobs on one self-assessment form?
You do both jobs on one self-assessment. No need to
you wouldn't need to register again, because you're already registered as self-employed and paying your Class 2 national insurance.
And you only have one tax reference under which you are completing your tax return.
When it came to completing your tax return, you'd probably split it though, wouldn't you, into your childminding income and then your blogging income, and just complete two sets of self-employed pages, setting out your income less your expenditure, giving you your net profit or your net loss.
Okay, we have two bloggers who've both asked if you can talk through in a little bit more detail the process of notifying HMRC that you're earning money self-employed. Obviously, you've said that applies and they need to do it within 3 months. Where do they go and what do they need to look for?
If you're running it as a business, I need to stress it out. If it's run as a business, you complete a form called CWF1, and that's, if you Google it, it will take you straight to Revenue website, and you can either complete it online or you can print it out and send it to Revenue by paper. At the same time, you will register. That's the form registers you for self-employment and national insurance. So once you inform Revenue, then Revenue will send you applicable correspondence informing you that they've now registered you, and they will advise you to make the national insurance contribution.
Yeah, which is then when you have to consider whether the small earnings Class 2 exception applies, and that's a different form, CF10, which you would complete if your income is, I think it's currently under £5,725.
That's right, yes.
But you would need to complete that form, otherwise they will start charging you Class 2 national insurance.
Yes. Yeah. And you have 3 months from the start of your trade to do that, otherwise you might face a penalty.
Nikki has asked whether registering your blog as a business affects your household insurance, and can you claim back the difference if it does?
Well, it's unlikely. Yes, I think it's unlikely.
I think it's unlikely, but we don't know.
Obviously, the house insurance, she needs to bear in mind that the house insurance won't cover her business items unless she informs her insurer. But then, obviously, the insurance might go up. Yeah. So
but then you would be able to claim that part, wouldn't you?
Yes, as an expense of your
use
business.
Of Home Office as part of the total claim that you're going to make.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me to a question from Michelle, who has asked, once I start earning as self-employed, do I need any particular kind of insurances to follow the rules?
Not necessarily, I suppose, as a blogger.
Not likely to be sued, are
you?
Because it's just your
I don't think you really need to, have public liability insurance. I don't think that would apply to bloggers.
Yeah. Okay. Next question was from Jax at Live Otherwise, who asks, how should I record expenses for things like mobile phones?
Well, Excel spreadsheet, I suppose, the easiest tool to record all your expenses. Just keep each separate column for different type of expense. At the end of the year, just summarize it all. And obviously, again, mobile phone is quite likely to be as well used for private calls. Mm-hmm. And therefore, you
may need to adjust the amount that you claim
against your income.
Okay, we have a question from Amy, who wanted you to clarify, when you were talking about capital allowances and buying assets, how would that apply to a blogger? Does that mean that if you buy something exclusively to use for your blog, that's completely tax deductible? Could you just run through that in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, basically, capital assets are fixed assets that you're going to use in your business. So this would include computers, laptops, desktops,
professional
printers, cameras, furniture that you would use, desk for your computer. And basically, you claim what's called capital allowances on that, and you just claim the cost of that. Basically,
if it's wholly used as a business asset, therefore you pay 100% of that. Obviously, up to the 250,000, which I'm sure it's more than enough. Obviously, again, if you say buying camera because you're making pictures of your food. Or that you are blogging about, or various other things, then obviously, and you are using it as well for private purpose, that you will make again restriction. You will just claim, say, 80% or 50% or whatever applicable in your case.
Thank you. We had another question on expenses from Emma, who wants to know, when you're working from home, can you claim money for things like heating or electricity and those kind of household bills? And do you have any advice on how you should calculate that?
Definitely you can. And the way you calculate it, usually you use a proportion of how many rooms, habitable rooms is there in your property.
Which would include bedrooms, living rooms, obviously not bathrooms and things like that. And split the cost if you want to do it that way.
Prorate that. Take into account as well the number of hours that you're
spending at home. Or there is the simplified rates that the Revenue have now released, which we did go over earlier.
Yeah, it's from, I suppose, from 10 to 26 pounds a month you can claim without kind of keeping record of any expenses, and that won't be questioned by Revenue. The £10 a month you can claim if you work 25 hours to 50 hours from home
a month,
and the £26 per month you can claim if you work over 100 hours. And there is £18 bracket as well for between when you work from home between.
If you didn't want to keep a good record, basically, of those expenses, you can just claim that flat rate, and the Revenue won't really argue with that.
Yes, but it might be obviously more beneficial to keep a log and keep the records of expenses, because obviously you might have a bigger
house
deduction, yeah,
and deduction,
yeah, mortgage interest or rent that you're paying. It's all included.
Okay, we had a question again about expenses from Maria at 5p Tapas, who said she listened to your advice about things like fridges and ovens. She's a food blogger and buys lots of props for photography, things like tablecloths and pretty dishes and cutlery. Do those things count as expenses, and can she claim for them?
Yes, they do. Presumably, is she using them later on for private use?
She says she wants a shelf that nobody else in the house is allowed to use apart from her.
Well, then that's, I suppose, purely business.
Purely business, yeah.
You know, everything, as long as you can argue that that's wholly and exclusively for business, then you can claim 100% of those expenses.
And, sorry, another follow-up question also from Maria, asking about photography. She claims for her camera, but things like SD cards and memory cards, but also repairs to her camera, do those count as legitimate expenses too?
Absolutely. Those won't be capital allowances. Under capital allowances, those will be just pure repairs and maintenance expenses. Again, if that camera is used for private use, we have to adjust it, yeah.
Okay. The next question was from Vicky, and I imagine actually will apply to lots of bloggers watching this. She's often paid by clients via PayPal, which when you take your money out will claim a percentage of your money as a fee. Can you claim the fees back as an expense, would you say?
Yes. What you do, you show your the gross fee that you received originally in your PayPal account, and that's your income. And against that, you claim the charges that are being made by PayPal, and that's your expense. So effectively, so that you don't...
You're only going to pay tax on the net.
Yeah, you pay tax on the net amount. So yes, you...
Okay, next up, we had a question from Ricky at Skint Dad, who wonders what advice you have on what stage should he think about opening a business bank account?
It depends. If you can keep, accurate records, you don't necessarily need to open a separate bank account. However, I suppose it makes life easier. And, if you have separate accounts just for business, it's more easier to record all income and expenses.
So then obviously you're going to be charged if you have a business account. So
yes, there will be bank charges to consider. Yeah.
Which you can claim as a deduction.
Yes, but obviously whether it's worth it.
Yeah.
Okay, our next question comes from Kelly, who wants to know, if you're on maternity leave and receiving SMP, can you still claim expenses on things like heating and electricity, etc., if you're blogging?
If your blog is a trade, then yes, definitely, and that won't affect your statutory maternity pay.
Yeah. Okay. That was simpler than I thought. Next question is from Emily Higgins, who says, sometimes when she's travelling, she has to use her phone to reply to emails or to update her blog, and that means that she has to buy more data. Does that count as an expense? And how do you differentiate between a capital expense and a regular expense?
Well, obviously, yes. The answer is yes. She can claim for the extra data that it's required. Obviously, if we are talking just about the phone, there won't be any capital item because that would be pure expense. So we don't need to worry about capital items. If that's the question.
Yeah.
Just about the phone, yes.
Yeah. Does that cover it, or?
Yes, I think so. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down. There's so many questions. I'm trying to find things that... We had another blogger actually ask, can you explain what the difference is when they're doing their tax return between day-to-day expenses and capital expenses?
Yes. Okay. Well, it's definitely size. I suppose, like, if you are spending, say, I don't know, a couple of £100, that can be still treated as an expense. And obviously, depends for how long you're gonna use it. Say you buy a computer, you won't use it just for a few months. You will use it for a couple of years. Yeah. So obviously, that will be definitely capital item. However, if you're just maintaining the computer, you are buying some software, that's all expense. Things like repairs, like extra memory cards, that will all be expense, because that's all kind of will be used quite quickly, and it's not a long term.
Yeah. I think the idea was pre the annual investment allowance, where you write off everything in 1 year. It used to be written down over a period of time, but that's obviously not relevant now, because you get 100% relief anyway.
Okay. Katie says she's horrible at keeping records and doing invoices. What advice do you have? Oh, sorry. Katie said she's asking for a friend. It's not her. But her friend is really dreadful at doing invoices. And what advice do you have? What's a good way to keep track?
Again, as simple as Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, and just getting into the habit.
Just keep a date, number your invoices, and keep a track of those, because it's important.
And then reconcile them with your bank statements. It's probably quite a good idea, isn't it?
Yes, given the recent, the revenue powers that they have, they can inspect your premises, and they
and
really...
they're desperate for money.
So and it's not so.
Should bloggers issue an invoice for everything they do? Because sometimes, I guess, some of the things that our bloggers do may be quite low value transactions. Should you issue a full invoice for each one, and what information needs to be on that invoice for record-keeping purposes?
Well, I suppose there should be definitely, invoices should be numbered.
Dated.
There should be date on them. Obviously,
who you're issuing it to.
Who you're issuing it to, your name. Quite a short description in respect of what that invoice is. Obviously, the amount you are charging.
With the VAT's involved.
Presumably, there isn't any VAT involved at this stage, so we don't need to worry about that. And what was for small items? I suppose there is, you don't need necessarily to issue invoices for very
a £5 or a £10 or
exactly really small amount. However, you still need to keep records of those
of the income coming in. Yeah.
Okay. Molly said, in terms of planning, she panics a little bit about not having enough put aside to pay her tax bill at the end of the year. As a rough guide, what kind of percentage of each payment coming in should bloggers be putting aside for tax and national insurance to ensure that they don't get caught out?
Well,
20-25 really, on average.
Sorry, could you just say that again, because I didn't hear you?
Between 20% and 25% is normally
just to be on the safe side, I suppose, yeah.
Okay, and somebody else has asked, Lindy has asked, what happens if you have income coming in from overseas? Should that be declared differently if you're working for somebody in the EU or for someone in the US? Does it all get declared on the same form?
All declared in the same way, assuming you are resident in the United Kingdom, because you are all taxable on your worldwide income. Well, there might be some kind of, obviously, if you not ordinary resident and some other, it's a complex area of residency. But I suppose, assuming you are UK resident, taxable on worldwide income, you are including all the income, regardless whether it's foreign or generated from the UK. So this will be all included in your accounts and taxable in the UK.
Okay, we've just got 5 minutes left, so I'm going to just scroll through the questions quickly and see where we've got something that I don't think has been covered. Another question from Vaughan, who said, if they were invited to review a restaurant opening, could they claim travel expenses for attending the event?
Yes, they can, definitely. We've got clients actually who are as well writing about food and tourism, and that's definitely allowable, yes.
Okay, and next question from Layla, who said, on the advice of a friend who's a solicitor, she has registered as a limited company so that she has limited liability. What steps does she need to take to ensure that she is doing the right thing in terms of Companies House and HMRC? What kind of top tips would you have for someone?
I would say at this stage, if you are running a limited company, appoint an accountant.
Yeah, definitely.
It's definitely more complex than just sole trade, and I suppose she should seek a professional help.
Because you need to file accounts at Companies House. There's so much more involved than just completing a tax return and a simple profit and loss account.
And the penalties are higher as well for
failing
to comply with companies' house requirements, with revenue requirements. So definitely.
Okay. And another question actually from Layla, who said, can you clarify under what circumstances somebody wouldn't need to register? Is it that somebody only needs to register with HMRC if their income is over £2,500? Is that correct?
No. It goes back to whether you are trading, your blog is a trade or it's a hobby. If it's a hobby, then you don't need to register with revenue.
As self-employed.
But
you still have to notify them of the income that you're making.
Yes, but you don't need to register for self-employment.
So there's no class 2 national insurance to consider.
Exactly.
Or class 4.
Yes. However, if you are running it as a trade, regardless of whether you're making a loss or a profit, you have to register with revenue as a sole trader.
Okay, and I think this will probably be the last question from Louise, who said, if she's paid for a blog post in vouchers, does she declare that as cash or does it come under something else?
Well, cash equivalent, so it comes as that.
Yeah,
if
it's just vouchers that you can exchange for cash, then
it's money worth. So it's as cash, same treatment.
Okay, you answered that really fast, so I'm going to squeeze in one more question, which is from Emily, who said her blog is a hobby, but she regularly earns money. Does that mean it's a trade or business?
Well, it's. I suppose there will be some further elements that will have to be considered.
Is she making a profit?
She's making a profit.
Well, she just says she's making money. Doesn't mean
earning
money. I don't know.
Assuming she's making a profit.
Maybe Emily can comment and let us know if she's making a profit.
Yes.
And in the meantime, can I just then squeeze in last question from Rachel, who said she's purchased a PC on credit, so she pays a certain amount per week. Can she still claim a percentage against tax?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
And she will as well get deduction for the interest that she's obviously paying, because assuming she's taking credit, so she's paying some interest on it as well.
That's great. And Emily said, yes, she's making a profit.
Then yes, well, she needs to pay tax, definitely. The question
is she running her blog with a view to make a motive to make a profit?
Well, it's the badges of trade. I would refer her to Revenue website to just check and see what she thinks about it and how she considers her business, whether it's a hobby or whether it's a trade. And from there,
how many transactions and
the number of transactions, the profit motive. Obviously, she might be just making it as a
But the profit she should be paying tax on anyway. But it's the national insurance question that regarding the self-employment. Isn't it?
Obviously, if her profit it's a profit and it's a hobby. The profit is less than 2,500. She can code it out, call revenue, and obviously they will deduct more tax from her employment. But that will mean she will have no further obligations to complete tax return and pay it over through self-assessment.
That's fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much and for going through so many questions. I know that we're going to provide the recording of the webinar to people who want to rewatch it or perhaps haven't been able to watch it live. But for now, Karen and Izabela, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I'm just going to hand back to Nick now. Hopefully he is still there. Nick, are you there?
I am indeed. Thank you, Sally. Thank you, ladies. Just one quick note to say that we're doing a second event in the new year, which we imagine will be very well received because it will be on the subject of how to make more money from your blog. Now, the USA are very good at blog monetization, and we're going to have some leading US bloggers share their secrets as to how to make more money from blogging. So we'll be letting you know in the new year when that event will be, and hopefully you'll all attend that one too. Thank you very much for attending, and good night to you all.